The latest job reports was released and it doesn't look so rosy. So what does this mean for the job seeker and where we're headed in the economy? Well, stick around. In this video, I'm going to share with you my thoughts. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to share with you what's going on in the labor market. I want to break down some of the latest reports that are coming out and look at the bigger context of where we're heading in this economy. Now, I'm the first to admit I'm not an economist, and I'm just interpreting the data as I find it. So use what I say with a grain of salt and do your own research. And I know that the news can be relatively depressing and overly pessimistic, but I do think it's important to stay on top of labor trends so that we can act like the CEO of our career and we can make the necessary steps to protect ourselves. And in this job market and the way things have been going over the last several years, it is absolutely in your best interest to start reclaiming control of your career. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, I encourage you to sign up for my free newsletter. And in it, I share concise, actionable tips on how to approach your job search and your career with more conviction and authority. In other words, I teach you how to become the CEO of your career. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free. I will leave a link in the comments below, and I hope to see you there. So, what's going on in the job market? Well, unfortunately, it's not looking very good. The data that was just released in July shows a relatively bleak picture of where things are progressing in the job market. And the US economy added only 114,000 jobs, which badly missed estimates of 175,000 jobs. And taking that even a step further, May and June's numbers were also revised downwards. So the numbers that were previously reported weren't accurate, and we actually have less jobs as a result. And more specifically, in May, they shaved 2,000 jobs off of the reported 216,000 jobs, and June saw a gain of 179,000, which is down 27,000 jobs, originally reported to be a growth of 206,000 jobs. So that brings the average non-farm payroll growth to 170,000 for the second quarter of this year. By way of comparison, the first quarter averaged 267,000 jobs, so it's nearly 100,000 jobs less per month. Furthermore, an average of 250,000 jobs throughout the entirety of 2023. So we're seeing a very sharp decrease in the number of jobs that are being posted and being filled. And if you're interested in historical trends on how we track going back to 2021, this is January, we can see payroll growth was humongous, 520,000 jobs in January. You can see it spiking all the way up to 700 or north of 700,000, all the way through about the first half of 2022. And again, this corresponds with the major job growth that we saw during that period of time. This was during the heyday of the job-seeking market. But the trend has been decidedly and sharply down over the last year and a half to 2 years, and the numbers are supporting it. And this is one of the reasons why it's much more difficult to find a job right now. There's simply not a lot of jobs being posted, and there's a lot of people who are looking for those jobs. And as you can see, the growth or the decline in growth is pretty remarkable. And as we get to July, 114,000, which was a massive drop from the peak, I would say it looks like February of 2022 of 714,000. So that's just to put it into perspective, how sharp of a decrease we've seen in job postings over the last several months. And the data from Indeed.com tracks with this. This is a chart that shows job posting growth over the period of basically 4 years, back to 2020. If you look at the very left of this chart, this is in the thousands. So the bottom of the market, when we were looking at probably the peak of the pandemic where everybody was getting laid off, there was no jobs available. It was around 60,000 active job postings on Indeed. And then we saw it screaming way north over the period of about 2 years, 1.5 years, up to a very peak in December, at basically the end of December 30th of 2021, where we saw 164,000 jobs posted on Indeed. But ever since then, you can see a very gradual, steady decline. It's getting sharper and sharper as we head deeper into 2024. So what does that mean for the unemployment rate? Well, we would also expect to see a similar type of pattern. And in fact, in July of 2024, we jumped up to 4.3%, which is a trend that is growing in a concerning direction. Now, historically, we're still at a low level of unemployment, but as you look at the trend lines back again, dating from July 2022 all the way through now, we can see a steady increase in unemployment claims. And so as you look We can see the peak here in 2020 of 14.8%, and that didn't last very long. And of course, everything shot back down. This is when this massive drop was when we had the employment boom, and we bottomed out sometime, it looks like January of 2023, and now it's been steadily increasing. So the bottom was 3.4%, which was near historical lows, and then now we're starting to trend upward. So it's grown from 3.4% all the way up to the most recent one, which is 4.3%. So you might be sitting there saying to yourself, like, hey, we're still relatively low, but it's the trend that is concerning. But as this number increases, of course, it also tracks with the fact that there's more and more companies that are laying off. In fact, Intel just announced a massive layoff of 15,000 employees, and I believe this equates to 15% of their staff. And this is particularly interesting because just a few short years ago, Intel accepted $8.5 billion in direct funding under the CHIPS Act to encourage growth, especially with jobs. And if you're not familiar with what the CHIPS Act is, it was an act called the CHIPS and Science Act, which is designed to lower cost, create jobs, and strengthen supply chains to counter China. And Intel was a big recipient of that, or beneficiary. Of course, that obviously has not worked out very well, and we're seeing these massive layoffs as a result. So clearly something is going wrong. In addition to that, we're also seeing a lot of layoffs that are happening in 2024 in July. And in particular, if we go through the layoff tracker, we can see we've got 1,500 employees with Cartwright. You've got Amdocs 3,000, Mercury Marine, which is the boating company. They make the boat engines. You've got 1,700 people, Warner Brothers, another 1,000. You've got some mining companies, 700, Intuit, 1,800, Redbox, Dyson. You've got some major layoffs. You've got Stellantis, UPS has announced. These are all within the last month in July. You've got FedEx, Ford, I know, is doing some downsizing in some of their plants globally, not just in the United States, but also globally. Microsoft. It's particularly concerning when Indeed.com, now it's going back to May, but Indeed.com also laid off 1,000 people. Of course, we've talked about Citigroup. We know about Tesla and some of the other, we've got Southwest here, Bristol Myers Squibb, Apple. I mean, this is going back into April, but nonetheless, the trend is still that we're seeing layoffs. Now, not at necessarily the historical pace that we've been seeing in the past, but there is still a lot of companies announcing big layoffs, and things do seem to be starting to heat up again in July. So what does that mean? I don't know. Hopefully this is just a temporary thing, but what's interesting now is that according to economists, there is the Sahm Rule, which has been tripped. So basically what it was named after is Claudia Sahm, who was the top economic advisor during the Obama administration and identified historical indicators of coming recessions dating all the way back to 1970. And what it is a 3-month moving average of an unemployment rate. If this moving average is more than 0.5 percentage point above the lowest 3-month moving average from the previous year, then a recession has always followed. So even though it might sound a little bit confusing, let's take a look at a chart that will show you. Here we can see a chart of, and this yellow line is the 0.5 increase line. So anytime you've seen that this number goes above the yellow line, it's triggered a recession, which you can see are these dark gray columns. And this is going all the way back to 1980. And without fail, every single time it's crossed this line, we've hit into a recession. And the last major recession that we had was in 2008. We had a very small or short, intense recession in 2020. But according to the numbers, we now have apparently hit above this line again for the first time in quite a while. I'm going to take out 2020 as an anomaly. But when you look at the last time we had a recession, I mean, realistically, we're way overdue for one. But if the numbers don't lie, it could mean that we're headed into a recessionary period. In a little bit more context to exactly what this is.
Claudia Sahm, I've got to ask the media question. Is the Sahm Rule in force at this moment?
It triggered. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that puts it up over its 0.5 percentage point threshold, noting that comes off of historical experience. That doesn't necessarily tell us where, we are right at this moment, saying a recession. We've seen way too much momentum in the unemployment rate in recent months. I mean, 4.3%. right? This is not, so whether we are at that moment of a recession or not, this is your build into substantial weakening in the labor market. Right.
I,
Like we have seen potential. All is not lost. We are, the bottom's not falling out. We should never panic. There are policy tools, there
right.
are levers. And again, I don't overread one data point, but this isn't one data point. So I think the case now for, hey, we're normalizing. We did need to slow things down some,
Right.
probably, generally speaking. But now the question is, okay, so we've had enough slowing here. What levels
Right.
this out? And that I think I don't have the answer for that.
So that's what we're saying. The Sahm Rule has been triggered. What does this mean? So there's the latest of what's going on in the jobs market. What are your thoughts? Do you think we're headed into a recession? And do these numbers paint a particularly bleak picture of what's to come? Furthermore, do you think the Sahm Rule holds any weight? Should we be concerned? And I think this is a great reminder of the importance of keeping that resume up to date, making sure that you're taking stock of what's going on in your career, your vertical, your industry, your company, and maybe expanding your networks a little bit while you're at it, because you might need them and it might become a very valuable asset for you. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. And as always, I'm going to keep a pulse on the labor market and share with you what is developing so that you don't have to. As always, appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.